All right, this is the OFN meeting room, and before we talk Buffalo Bills football, make sure to order America's #1 draft guide for 39 years and counting, the Ourlads Draft Guide, by logging on to ourlads.com. The Buffalo Bills made a huge move this offseason when they acquired Stefon Diggs from Minnesota. Big part of the deal means the Bills relinquished their first-round draft pick and will wait until late round 2 before hearing their name called. So how will Diggs and no first-round pick affect the Bills draft? Well, let's find out by asking Ryan Talbot, Buffalo Bills writer for NewYorkUpstate.com. Thanks again for joining us, Ryan.
Hey, absolutely. My pleasure.
All right, Ryan. So let's get with the big story. Stefon Diggs, if I'm a Bills fan after what happened last year, playoffs, understanding that one of the issues that the team had was just more offensive explosion, and they go out and they get one of the more exciting receivers in the league in Stefon Diggs, that's got to excite me big time as a fan.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it was a great trade for the Bills. I think there was someone from the Texans play-by-play team or someone from the Texans media that said, if the Bills had Diggs last year in that playoff game, there's no doubt that he believes the Bills would have won that game. Like you said, they were lacking explosive playmakers. They had John Brown, who was a very good last year, had a career year. They had Cole Beasley in the slot, who had his second best season of his career with Buffalo last season. Second best year of his career, I should say, but first year in Buffalo. But they didn't really have anything else besides that. In that playoff game, you had Duke Williams getting double-digit targets, and this is a guy that was inactive for most of the season. Yet here he comes into the playoff game and gets double-digit targets. No knock on Duke, but it's a lot better to have a guy like Stefon Diggs now as your #1 wide receiver, pushing down John Brown to #2, having Beasley in the slot still. That's a really strong 1 through 3, and I can completely understand why the Bills would make that push for Diggs and be willing to give that first-round pick, because right now their Super Bowl window is wide open. Yep. You have Josh Allen on a rookie deal. That's the time to strike when you're not paying your quarterback $30+ million a year, which, in due time, as long as Allen keeps making progress, which he made big strides from year 1 to year 2, eventually that's something that the team's going to have to do. And at that point, it'll be a lot harder to pay for premier talent to come in and play along to keep that defense intact, which is a top 3 unit right now.
Yeah, and speaking of the defense, big additions in the offseason, and you wouldn't necessarily think that's where the Bills would spend most of their time and money outside, of course, of the major investment with the trade, but most of their free agent moves were all on defense. And of course, Oliver was the first-round pick last year. You bring in Addison, you bring in Klein, Butler. Of course, you got that connection again with the coaching staff in Carolina, so that helps. So this defense is really starting to get even deeper than it was last year. And though I look at it and I say, I could still see them maybe investing in some more maybe edge rushers, because Addison's 32. I believe Murphy's in the final year of his deal. Hughes is 31. So it wouldn't be a surprise to see them add some more defenders, especially up front, to that pass rush, even though most people might just immediately think, it's got to be offense.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The only thing that's working against the Bills here is this isn't a great edge class, especially after you get past a few players early on. So, there could be some intriguing options for them round 2, round 3, whether it's a Curtis Weaver, whether it's Taylor out of Tennessee. There's some guys that they might like that they think has that upside. I will say that they added Darryl Johnson late in last year's draft 7th-round pick, and he actually played more defensive snaps than people realize, contributed on special teams, really flashed in the preseason and during training camp with some pass rush moves. So he could be an answer there. They like Mike Love, another young guy, not as explosive as Darryl Johnson, but they do have some youth there. But like you said, Addison will be 33 when this season begins. Hughes only has a few years left on his deal, and he's over 30. Murphy's entering the last year of his deal. So it would make a lot of sense for the Bills to address that position. In free agency, though, the move has made sense because you lose Shaq Lawson, You lose Jordan Phillips. Both players signed for about $10 million per year on average with their new teams, the Dolphins and the Cardinals, respectively. So you had to replace them first and foremost. Addison comes in and provides more of a pass rush than Lawson could. They might lose a little bit in terms of run defense. That's one area where Lawson thrived. But then, they bring in Vernon Butler, a guy who really came on this past season in Carolina. His former defensive coordinator / defensive line coach now is here in Buffalo as the defensive line coach. Makes sense to bring him aboard. Quentin Jefferson wasn't a former Panther, but Dan Morgan, a member of the Bills front office, knew him pretty well from his time in Seattle, so some familiarity there. And he was actually better last year, the last 2 seasons total in terms of pass rush, getting after the quarterback, maybe not getting the sacks, than Phillips was with those 9+ sacks last season. He may not get after the quarterback, but he had more pressures with about 100 fewer snaps. So they upgraded there. Klein is going to replace Lorenzo Alexander at linebacker, and then they added some veteran depth at cornerback as well. I think cornerback's still in play, though, as well, because I think Josh Norman, I think he may have lost a step athletically. Much better fit in Buffalo's defense than what he was in Washington. But there's still some questions there. And E.J. Gaines, very talented, but a guy that has dealt with a lot of injuries in his career.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because that is the other position on defense that kind of sticks out a little bit. Like you mentioned, Norman is still up there in age. White is a tremendous number 1 corner, ain't no doubt about that. But there's still there's some youth there. There's still not the continuity that you'd like to see out of players that maybe you will see in the next couple of years. Levi Wallace, of course, has done a tremendous job in just a limited amount of time. Nobody expected him to play as well as he has as an undrafted player. And then talk about those 2018 picks, how they're coming along, because that's also going to be important on how confident they are as far as Neal and Johnson when they're thinking about where they need to go and invest in another corner.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first and foremost, Trey White, premier number 1 cornerback, a guy that I'm sure the Bills would like to lock down long term. I wouldn't be shocked if White's going to gamble on himself in terms of play out, this year's deal, and obviously the 5th-year option as well to get as much money as he can in a long-term deal after that. But I think you're going to be talking about $20+ million a year when it comes time to re-sign him, and he's earned that. So opposite, though, like we already touched upon Norman, we already touched upon Gaines. Levi Wallace, like you said, he was an undrafted free agent. He's really played a lot since he's joined the Bills, but he was picked on a lot last year, and he gave up a lot of receptions. There were some tackling issues at times. He had some injuries that he dealt with late in the season. I thought he bounced back late in the year, especially that Pittsburgh game, though. He sealed the playoff berth with an interception in the end zone. The following week or the last week of the season against the Jets, he had an interception before he went down with an injury, a non-contact injury. So, he's been up and down, but teams are picking on him a lot. I think he has a shot to win that job. I would like to see the Bills maybe go to the cornerback well in this year's draft, whether it's a guy like Stefon Diggs in round 2 or a Bryce Hall, guys that can fit that zone defense that Sean McDermott likes to play a lot of. Maybe a Troy Pride Jr. a little bit later in the draft. There are options out there. In terms of what else they have, Taron Johnson had a great rookie season. He was okay last year. He's a guy that has some injury concerns as well. He gets shoulder injuries. He gets banged up a lot, it feels like, throughout the season, whether he's just missing a series or 2 or a few plays. He seems to miss some time and some snaps there. So, maybe you bring in a nickel, a cornerback, someone that you can have compete with him in this year's draft. And then Siran Neal, he's played well on defense when he's had the opportunities in that big nickel role. He's been actually a special team standout for Buffalo. He's really hit there. I think he could see a bigger role on defense if they don't go with a guy like Kyle Duggar in round 2 or a Jeremy Chin, guys that might play big nickel in this defense, which I think the Bills plan on using a lot in 2020, considering they took one of their coaches and gave him the title big nickel coach. it's definitely something to watch and something I think the Bills want to utilize starting this season.
All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about the offense because there's still work to be done there, especially on the offensive line. The Bills transformed the offensive line last year, and a lot of people looked at what they did and how many new faces were added to the line. The fact that as a group, they played well. I mean, they were very healthy also. It's very rare. I think there's only a couple teams that I've seen last year in the NFL where I think it was 79 of the 80 possible starts along the offensive line, something like that. One missed game, one missed start from the entire offensive line the entire year. So that helps. But look, you take that little step up, which is no doubt that they did. They were a much better offensive line last year, but still, as far as rock solid talent, there's still work to be done there. So talk a little bit about if the Bills go offensive line early, which specific area do they need to address first?
Yeah, again, great question. It really depends on what they think about Cody Ford entering, his second season. And I think that if they attack the tackle position on day 2, that kind of tells you that they want to kick him inside to guard sooner rather than later. A lot of draft analysts had him projected to be better at guard than tackle in the NFL, but the Bills really did kind of stand by him and stick by him and give him a chance to play right tackle. And he did have some really good moments there, but he also struggled at times, had some issues with maybe not penalties, but maybe missed assignments, letting guys get by him, getting beat, which it's to be expected. Even if you're a high draft pick, and he was a round 2 pick, it's to be expected because a lot of these guys have, the college bowl games, then they go right into the Senior Bowl, or they go into different types of games there. They have the Combine, the Pro Day, which obviously the prospects this year's draft are having something completely different than this experience, but a lot of rookies kind of hit a wall eventually because they didn't really get a full offseason to kind of get ready. So I'm really intrigued to see what Ford brings to the table in year 2 after he's had a whole offseason to kind of build up his strength, work on his game a little bit. I want to see what he does there. And the starting 5, as you mentioned, were pretty healthy. They did deal with some injuries, though. They lost Adrian Waddle before the season even began. He was going to be a lot of people thought he was going to be their swing tackle. Tyan Secchi was supposed to compete with Cody Ford for that tackle job. He was out for a little bit with an injury. He did share some snaps there, though, when he came back. Mitch Morse missed some time in training camp with concussion issues, which is something he has a history of. So that was a bit scary, but he was relatively healthy throughout the year. This unit is not a top 5 offensive line. I think Josh Allen made them look a little bit better than they were because he can kind of escape the pressure and he can turn nothing into something at times. But they, like you said, they're also a significant upgrade. They have some versatility. John Feliciano was their starting right guard last season, but he can also slide over to center if something were to happen to Mitch Morse. Spencer Long is kind of a swing on the interior of the line. He has that flexibility to play multiple spots, although best suited at guard. They just signed Darrell Williams in free agency, a guy that Brendan Bean and Sean McDermott know well from Carolina. Played 4 positions on the offensive line last year: left tackle, left guard, right tackle. Best suited for the right side of the line, but there's another guy that could come in and compete for a starting role, whether it be at guard or at tackle. So I like what they have there in terms of starting talent. I like what they have in terms of their depth as well. But that said, if a tackle with high upside, and there's quite a few of them in this year's draft, were to slide into round 2, I could see Brendan Bean doing something very similar where he trades up 10 picks in round 2 to go and get that guy because, as nice as it would be to get as many weapons as possible for Josh Allen, the best thing you can do is protect him.
Oh, yeah, no question about it. And he's a great athlete, but you don't want him to run around all that much. That just, rarely do you see, no matter how big, and look, he's got great size for it, but it's still, you're playing with fire. And it also will help the running game too. Big find with getting Singletary last year. Gore's moved on. and it is time. So that has to be a big position as well, isn't it? They're going to have to look, and running back you can find anywhere in the draft. But I got to believe at some point they're going to look for somebody else that could be a significant, maybe number 2, right behind Singletary as early as this year.
Yeah, Brendan Bean really did compliment TJ Yeldon recently in a conference call, saying that they have the most confidence in him. But I think Yeldon would ideally be a better number 3 for this team, a guy that can come and contribute, that could step in if there was an injury at running back. But you don't want him to necessarily be your workhorse back. He can catch the ball, he can run the ball. He's had some success to a certain degree. But like you said, I think the number 2 running back job is something that they could address. A lot of these mock draft machines have one of the top running backs fall to the Bills at number 54, but that doesn't mean it's going to be that way at the actual draft. I think you're going to see DeAndre Swift go first round. I wouldn't be shocked if Dobbins and obviously Jonathan Taylor both went late round 1, early round 2. And then you're starting to talk about guys like LSU, Clyde Hilaire, things like that. And I'm not sure if number 54 is the time to address the running back position, because I think there's some mid-round guys that really fit. Zach Moss kind of fits that bruising role that the Bills have had in years past, whether it's been Frank Gore, whether it's been Chris Ivory, Mike Tolbert. They've liked that type of back. I'm not saying that they should continue to go that route, but if that's what they want to do, Moss could be there round 3, round 4 range. Evans out of Appalachian State is a guy that they've had a pre-draft Zoom conference with. A.J. Dillon out of Boston College. Joshua Kelly, UCLA on day 3. So there's options there. And then if the board doesn't fall to them in terms of them addressing the running back position, there are still some quality backs out there in free agency. So post-draft, talk to Carlos Hyde. Post-draft, talk to Lamar Miller. See where he's at health-wise. See if there's some way that you can get a physical done on him to see how he's doing. I know that's probably the big dilemma for him. Devonta Freeman is another guy that's available. So if they don't find that guy in the draft, you can find a complement for Devin Singletary post-draft as well. I think running back's wide open because, there's some real talent in this year's draft. But I don't think the Bills are going to force their hand. Brendan Bean's been pretty forthright and honest about always going best player available, no matter what the position is in terms of the Bills might already have a stud there. But, hey, if that's the best guy on our board and we can find a role for him, we're going to go ahead and get that person.
At Ryan Talbot Bills, that is where we can find you on Twitter, Ryan. And last question then, do you have – because the Bills are deep into the second round, did you have like a mock draft or something that you put out there for the Bills? And if so, is there a specific player or position that you have personally favored or believe that the Bills will go with that second round pick?
Yeah, there's 2 names. Kyle Duggar is one. They visited him a lot on campus, talking with coaches, getting to know him pretty well in terms of watching his games and things like that. Small school, I think they were kind of hoping he'd fly under the radar, but then his name became more and more popular throughout the season. He held his own at the Senior Bowl against, some high-level competition. So I think he's in play. And then if I were to guess, I think a guy like Stefon Diggs, Stefon's brother, could be in play number 54. Mel Kiper Jr. recently said that his stock was falling a little bit. At one time, he was looked at as a late first-round pick, but then Kiper recently said he could fall all the way to early on day 3. I personally don't see that happening. I think if he's there at 54, the Bills would think long and hard about it because he's another cornerback that's a really good fit for this zone scheme that Sean McDermott likes to run out of quite a on a game-to-game basis.
All right. Well, we're going to keep an eye, and especially since, of course, I do the Jet Show here on the RLads Football Network. So we've talked during the season, and it's one of those things where I still think it's almost like a surreal thing that Tom Brady's no longer there with the Patriots, because even though you're hearing the talk about it's wide open now, and the Bills have got to be the favorite. And even as a Jet fan, you want to be optimistic, but still it's like, okay, yeah, but I don't know how to feel because it's been so long since Brady hasn't been there, and the Patriots, until they look, if they don't bring and add a veteran quarterback to that team, I don't care what anybody says about Jared Stidham or Brian Hoyer. if I'm a Jet fan, a Bills fan, a Dolphin fan, I'm going to feel like I got a legitimate chance to beat that team. So this is really going to be the first season in 20 years that fans inside that division, not Patriot fans, have hope.
Yeah, I agree. I think every other fan base within that division for the last 20 years has been saying, okay, this is our year to compete for a wild card spot. They didn't even think playoffs, or I'm sorry, AFC East title. But you're right. It is up for grabs now. I'm not going to write off Bill Belichick in that team. I know they've lost talent on defense. They lost Tom Brady. They lost their offensive line coach, possibly the best offensive line coach in NFL history. So, it seems like things are stacked against them, but Belichick is still a defensive mastermind. I could see him trying to grind out games this year with his run game, make life easier for Stidham or whoever the quarterback will be for this team. So that way they're not finding themselves in shootouts, which is, it's something that they could have done in years past to win games. But I don't think that's going to be the style that they play this year. But it's going to be very intriguing to see how it all unfolds.
All right, Ryan, I appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you again at some point after the draft, before the season, or practices, whenever they begin. But hey, thank goodness for the NFL, huh? I know what people say optic-wise, but I love it. I mean, how can you not love the decisions that they've made to give us fans, football fans, sport fans, something to live and breathe with during this downtime?
Yeah, it's been a nice distraction, I think, for football fans. It's been nice for people covering the game too. The NFL truly is a year-round sport. So it's been nice though that they didn't kind of delay any plans. They're still going to go ahead with the draft in their own way. And I feel for the prospects that don't get that red carpet moment. They don't get to go out and shake Goodell's hand. But if anything, it kind of gives us that sense of normalcy that we're still having this, that there's still a shot that you're going to have a season this year, whether it's shortened or whether, you don't have an off season, whatever the case may be. It's nice for the optics in terms of letting us believe that, they still think there's going to be a 2020 season.
And if they're feeling bad about not getting the red carpet treatment, all they have to do is, hey, they just came out of college. They've got, let's say, if you were coming out of, I don't know, Kentucky, you're a Kentucky Wildcat football player, and you all you have to do is talk to your buddies on the basketball team and see how they feel, because they didn't even get March Madness. So
yeah, that's true.
I think they could deal with not having a red carpet when their buddies in basketball didn't even get their March Madness. So
yeah, I think that's fair.
Ryan, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you next time.
Yes, thank you.